From Lagos, the nation's commercial capital, this is the News at 10. Live from Channels Television. Reporting tonight, Ijoma Unyato.
Hello and welcome. President Muhammadu Buhari orders task force on COVID-19 to procure some of Madagascar's coronavirus cure for validation, says Catholic bishops have volunteered over 400 of their clinics across the country as isolation centres. Governor Rotimi Akeredolu confirms first COVID-19 death in Ondo State, says 6 more patients in isolation have tested negative for the virus. Kaduna State reunites 210 Almajiri with their parents as Yobe State government promises not to repatriate them to their indigent states, while 30 of the Almajiri have been intercepted in Ogun State. And criticisms trail British Prime Minister Boris Johnson's quarantine restrictive measures ahead of planned easing of lockdown. Plus, we'll have business, sports, news from Abuja, the FCT, and later on news from our studios in London.
On business news, federal government inaugurates implementation committee for the resuscitation of the moribund Ajaokuta steel.
On sports news tonight, United Kingdom government gives green light for professional sports to resume behind closed doors for broadcast from the 1st of June.
And from Abuja, Gombe State House of Assembly summoned state task force on COVID-19 over protests by coronavirus patients and alleged poor medical treatment.
As the search for an effective cure for the coronavirus continues, President Muhammadu Buhari has approved the procurement of a shipment of Madagascar's local treatment for COVID-19. But this will be subjected to local scrutiny upon arrival, with a mandate that it must pass through validation tests. This was confirmed by the chairman of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, Mr. Boss Mustafa, who also condemns in strong terms assault on frontline health workers in various treatment and isolation centres across the country.
I welcome you to the national...
It is a daily news briefing by the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, and the chairman is leading the day's briefing with an assessment of the first week of the relaxation of lockdown. The task force chairman informs the gathering about directives from President Buhari to bring in the Madagascar treatment for COVID-19.
It's been freighted to Guinea-Bissau by the president of Madagascar, president of Prime Minister, sent it to Guinea-Bissau. And certain allocations have been made to different countries. We have an indication of the quantity that has been allocated to Nigeria. I've received instructions from Mr. President to make arrangements to freight it home with a clear instruction that I should subject it to the validation process.
We have a promise of being able to get sample of the herb or the botanical product that is there for analysis, and also probably use that opportunity to speak with the health authorities there, particularly the scientific community, on how they use it. But obviously, to also give that to the research community here with us to examine and see what they can do with it.
The Minister of Foreign Affairs also gives updates on evacuations.
Now we have over 600 evacuees in various accommodation in Lagos and in Abuja. And we're reaching, as I understand from our medical people, a saturation point. So this will mean that we will be staggering our flights in evacuating Nigerians and making sure that we deal with the ones that we have in place before bringing back others.
The chairman decries the lack of compliance with the public health advisories during the first week of relaxing the lockdown. But more worrisome is the assault on frontline health workers by patients in some isolation centers.
The Presidential Task Force has also continued to receive, rather sadly, reports about challenges facing the frontline health workers. They have received threats to lives, experienced detention by patients, they are actually nursing to health, and suffered other forms of harassment. The Presidential Task Force COVID-19 views such behavior as reprehensible and should be deprecated.
The first week of the relaxation of the lockdown recorded huge violations of all the public health advisories, including social distancing and the use of protective gears. However, the PTF hopes that citizens will take more responsibility during the second week and help stop the spread of the virus.
Meanwhile, the chairman of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 has confirmed that the Catholic Mission has volunteered over 400 of its clinics across the country as isolation centers. Mr. Mustafa asked state governors to approach the mission for further details.
As part of efforts to support the state in the establishment of isolation and treatment centers, I wish to remind our state governors that the Catholic Bishops' Conference has offered and volunteered all the 425 hospitals and clinics that belong to the Catholic Mission nationwide for adaptation and use as isolation centers. Governors in the various states are encouraged to please approach Catholic archbishops and bishops in their states to access these facilities.
It's been confirmed that the first COVID-19 fatality recorded in Ondo State had renal problems, a health condition that complicated his treatment. This is the explanation offered by Governor Rotimi Akeredolu while addressing newsmen on the development in Akure, the state capital. Governor Akeredolu also announced that 6 COVID-19 patients in the state who tested negative twice have been discharged, while 9 other patients are being treated at the Infectious Diseases Hospital in Akure. The victim, according to the governor, was a man who arrived in the state from Lagos on April the 27th, showing symptoms.
And of the 16 cases, we have successfully treated 6 and have them discharged. 9 are still under care at the Infectious Disease Hospital, Akure, while 1 has passed on. Well, we admitted the 16th case from Almajiri yesterday at the RDH. We have commenced line tracing for the 3 new cases.
And still in the southwest, operatives of the Ogun State Traffic Compliance and Enforcement Agency say they've intercepted a truck loaded with about 30 Almajiri at the Joju area of Odota local government area of the state. The truck is said to have been covered with tarpaulin, meant to be carrying only goods. The true nature of what the truck was conveying came to light when operatives forced the driver to park and opened the tarpaulin, revealing the Almajiri parked alongside stacks of pepper. The truck was reportedly turned back and led to the toll gate, the border area between Ogun and Lagos State, from where they were said to have come. But it's a better deal for the Almajiri elsewhere, as an initial batch of 210 who were deported from Kaduna, from Kano, Gombe and Plateau states and quarantined for COVID-19 have been sent back to their respective local government areas to be reunited with their families. All of them tested negative after they were quarantined for 14 days. The Kaduna State Commissioner for Human Services and Social Development, Hafsat Baba, says the children will be returned to school, where they'll continue with their Quranic studies alongside Western education.
After 14 days of quarantine and testing negative for coronavirus, these Almajiri, evacuated from Kano, Gombe and Plateau State, are said to be reunited with their families. So far, 65 of those deported to Kaduna State who tested positive for COVID-19 are undergoing treatments at the State Isolation and Treatment Center, while the results of others are being awaited. Before their movement, the Kaduna State government handed over a covering letter containing a commitment by their parents to ensure that the education and welfare of their wards, as well as not sending them out of their homes under any pretext.
We have already drafted a memorandum of commitment between the government and the parents. So by the time they sign it, we're going to sensitize them on what it takes to be a parent.
We'll collaborate and ensure that all the local government councils, the 23 local government councils, follow this to the letter.
The 210 Almajiri were later conveyed to their various local governments in buses, accompanied by state government officials. One of the local government council officials assures that the required monitoring will be done.
We are going to do much to discourage the parents from sending their children to state for getting Western education. Even at our houses, they can do that.
The decision to deport the Almajiri to their respective states of origin is a collective agreement of the Northern Governors Forum that all Almajiri should be returned to their home states for better management, especially with the emergence of the deadly coronavirus pandemic. Over 30,000 Almajiri have been deported to their respective states, while the Kaduna State government has also received 689 of them from other states.
Meanwhile, the Kaduna State Ministry of Justice has also announced the conviction of 605 culprits between Thursday and Friday last week for violating the state's lockdown order. But there are no plans to return the Almajiri residents in Yobe State in the northeast to their various states of origin. And this decision is taken at a time when northern governors are returning children to their home states owing to the COVID-19 pandemic. The Chief of Staff to the Governor, Abdullahi Gashua, told journalists that the state has taken steps to regulate how Quranic schools are being run.
Not making any plan. Our position is that we are going to return the Almajiris that are here. Even those who are of the origin, who are outside the state, we welcome them, quarantine them, and yet leave them to join their families. So you know, Yobe and Borno El Olympian Center of Learning. And Yobe is a predominantly Muslim community. So there is no way, because of this development now, that we now say we are deporting or repatriating Almajiris. No. The position of the government is that we are going to accept them, we are going to regulate the way they run these affairs in conjunction with the affairs and the traditional chiefs. So that's the position of the government.
Myself. Now, the Lagos State government has discharged 33 COVID-19 patients, and this was confirmed on the State Ministry of Health's Twitter handle. The patients, comprising 19 females and 24 males, all Nigerians, were discharged from the isolation facilities at Onikon and Etiosa. According to the Ministry of Health, 17 patients from Onikon and 16 from Etiosa isolation centers tested negative twice. This now brings the number of patients successfully managed and discharged in Lagos to 502. In part two, after the break, we'll open discussions on the impact of COVID-19 on small and medium-scale businesses, and we'll be joined by the Director General of the Small and Medium Enterprises Development Agency of Nigeria, Dr. Umaru Rada. That's in a moment. Do join us again. Welcome back. If you've just joined us, you're watching the news at 10 on Channels Television, coming to you live from Lagos. A reminder of our top stories. President Muhammadu Buhari orders task force on COVID-19 to procure some of Madagascar's coronavirus cure for validation. Says Catholic bishops have volunteered over 400 of their clinics across the country as isolation centers. Governor Rotimi Akeredolu confirms first COVID-19 death in Ondo State, says 6 more patients in isolation have tested negative for the virus. Kaduna State reunites 210 Almajiri with their parents as Yobe State government promises not to repatriate them to their indigent states, while 30 of the Almajiri have been intercepted in Ogun State. And criticisms trail British Prime Minister Boris Johnson's quarantine restrictive measures ahead of planned easing of lockdown. Our website, channelstv.com, has more information on our top stories and others. Subscribe and watch Channels Television's live stream on YouTube and other social media platforms using your mobile device browser, or you can download the Channels TV app for Android and iOS devices from their respective stores. You can also watch us via your smart TV platforms on Apple TV, Android, Fire, and Roku TV as well. With COVID-19 taking lives and rattling economies across the globe, the survival of small and medium businesses has become a cause of concern. Nigeria's SMEs are not immune as operators fear for the future of their businesses. Our business correspondent Temple Ashaju reports.
Small and medium businesses account for about 85% of jobs in Nigeria. While the COVID-19 partial lockdown is ongoing, a lot of these firms have continued to struggle to remain in operation. And at this point in time, the disposable incomes of Nigeria is on a downward trend. This brings to bear the question if the SMEs are still the backbone of the Nigerian economy. Latest figures from the National Bureau of Statistics shows that the total number of enterprises in Nigeria is estimated at 41.5 million as at December 2017. A further breakdown of the figure reveals that micro-enterprises constitute 99% of total SMEs, while small businesses account for 71,000 and medium-sized enterprises represent about 1,800. With the outbreak of COVID-19, however, it's been a distressing time for SMEs having to cope with the risks of the lockdown.
We're having such raw materials that needs to be turned to cash. There are bills running every day. We need to pay staff salary. In our own case, we cannot sack staffs because they've been trained. If we sack them, that means we are the loser.
Lagos is home to 8,395 units of Nigeria's enterprises. Quite a number of them are members of the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, currently clamoring for loan moratorium and tax waivers.
We have appealed to government through Central Bank. Why not Central Bank, through Moral Association, plead with these commercial banks to freezing the interest rate? CBN has given money for those that have CBN funds. The government, through presidency, forced BOI to do the same. But what are the commercial banks? And majority of these loans are from commercial banks.
Government needs to give us at least 1 year tax-free for us to be able to recoup. And even paying our bills too. Our integrity matters.
Part of the response of government so far is the provision of 50 billion naira program for manufacturers.
I was really glad that at least the central bank took that initiative, and they did it very early on, like the middle of March or so. So we're 7 weeks into what they've announced, and yet I don't know a single person who has received it. I haven't received it. Other businesses, I put it on my social media to ask. I call people up. Until now, we haven't received anything.
The world is expected to slip into economic recession this year. This could lead to a four-phase process of shutdown, supply chain disruption, demand depression, and recovery. But the severity of each phase could depend on government's practical response to Nigeria's 41.5 million SMEs. Temple Ashaju, Channels Television News.
Let's take a closer look at the impact of COVID-19 lockdown measures on small businesses. I'm now being joined live from Abuja by the Director General of the Small and Medium Enterprises Development Agency of Nigeria, Dr. Umaru Rada. Thanks a lot for joining us on the News at 10.
Thank you for having me.
Just how distressing is it across the various categories of SMEs that we see coping with the nature of disruption in the last 6 weeks or so?
I think, honestly, we are facing a very difficult situation because this is something that is happening globally. The economy of the small and medium businesses in the country has really suffered because of this COVID-19 pandemic that is happening all over the world. And Nigeria is not an exception, especially Nigeria, which has one of the highest number of MSMEs in Africa. And this is a very, very important sector of the economy, which helps in the development of the entire economy of the country because it's a sector that employed about 60 million Nigerians. So this is a sector that really needs to be given attention. And I thank the federal government for rolling out some plans by the CBN, especially the 50 billion that they roll out for the MSME, so that the MSME can be able to survive this hardship they are facing under this current situation. And again, we are happy that the federal government also gave moratorium to all the loans given by the federal government, including those ones from BOI. And because of the other chunk of the loans that comes from commercial banks and microfinance banks, I think we wrote a letter through our ministry to the CBN governor so that the CBN governor, through the bankers committee, can sit down and look at these issues from the microfinance bank perspective, where most of the micro and small businesses got their facilities, and also to look at the facilities given by the commercial banks so that they can show a face of humanity by trying to reduce the moratorium, the interest rate, to enable these businesses to survive. This is the engine room of the economic development of this nation, and we shouldn't play with it. And again, we must thank the federal government for constituting the economic sustainability team, the team headed by the vice president of this country. And I happen to be part of the subcommittee on the job creation, where the federal government is looking at how they can sustain and create about 2 to 3 million jobs within this period so that it can give a kind of relief to the people under this subsector of the economy.
All right, let me quickly ask you, you've talked about moratoriums and obviously there have also been calls for tax waivers. Some of the SMEs have raised alarm over certain requests for tax for the month of April where there was a lockdown. So is Sweden doing anything about it to address that? Have you heard about that?
Yes, we have gotten some complaints from some of the MSMEs, and we are trying to engage the federal revenue and other state governments who are putting more pressure on those MSME. Things has to be done under this period so that we can give a kind of relief to those people. And again, we should also, there is also a loan that we usually give under all of which we give capital and working machineries to those MSMEs. We have also given them a waiver of 6 months, and the SMEDA is also looking at giving them a moratorium of additional 1 year so that these people can have enough time to recover and have enough time to sustain their economy and get much needed income to sustain the life of their people and their families.
I mean, earlier on you were talking about palliatives. You mentioned the CBN's 50 billion naira relief fund that has been going around. But looking at comments from some of your members, they are to see anyone who has actually benefited yet. Are you monitoring, how that's going to be disbursed and whether or not they're getting it as quickly as they need it, even though the announcement has been made about 7 weeks ago.
I think they have given relief on some of the procedures and some of the processes. And a lot of people who have applied are getting it easier than before, because most of the procedures to obtain those loans were relieved, were easy up, so that people can be able to access it easily and quickly. And a lot of people who have applied through the National Microfinance Bank have started processing those funds. You know, there are different categories. There is one for the household, which is about 3 million naira maximum. And there is one for small and medium businesses, which the maximum is 25 million. And giving that kind of money to the macro, small and medium enterprises in the country will really give a kind of relief to the economy of this country, and it will keep the business moving.
All right, Director General of SMED and Dr. Umaru Rada, thanks a lot for sharing your thoughts with us on the News at 10 tonight.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
A London-based human rights lawyer and conflict analyst, Bulama Bukati, is calling for a systematic approach in handling the rising case of community transmission in the northern region of the country. Mr. Bukati strongly believes that the relocation of Almajiri in the north, in addition to the poor education, could worsen the spread of coronavirus if left unchecked.
The Almajiri question is an issue of concern because when we say the Almajiri, we are talking about little children, some as young as 4 years old, to the age of 16, who have left their homes in the name of going for Islamic education. And they live in the homes of their malams, that's their teachers who are not formally educated either. And they live in crowded rooms, some of them sleeping on the street, some of them rooming from one every night. And because the Almajiris beg on the street and in the neighborhood, they enter every place you know in the neighborhood. Which means if one Almajiri is infected, there is the potential of that Almajiri carrying this disease to every household around the area, and they could be real vectors transmission. And the fact that Almajiris in Kaduna, Almajiris in Bauchi, who were repatriated from Kano, have tested positive, tells you that many Almajiris would have been infected with this virus. Take it to the neighborhood. Like I said, they enter houses in the neighborhood to beg. They go to youth homes to beg for food and also do menial jobs. So if you have this population infected, the possibility is that this virus has entered into every nook and cranny of the cities that are affected. All these are issues that can complicate matters even further.
When the News at 10 returns, we have more updates on COVID-19. Plus, federal government inaugurates implementation committee for the resuscitation of the moribund Ajaokuta steel plant. That's on Business News. Do join us again. Back to the News at 10. Let's cross over to Abuja now. And here's Linda Akigbe. Linda?
Hello, Ijoma. Now, the Federal Executive Council, FEC, will be holding a virtual meeting on Wednesday to be presided over by President Muhammadu Buhari. The meeting is being held virtually because of the physical distancing order that is still in place. This has been confirmed by the Special Advisor to the President on Media and Publicity, Mr. Femi Adesina. Ahead of that meeting, the Economic Sustainability Committee, chaired by Vice President Yemi Oshibajo, is reviewing the draft Economic Sustainability Plan, which will be sent to President Buhari for approval. The committee, formed by the President at the end of March, is tasked with, among others, tackling the economic fallouts of the COVID-19 pandemic and creating a sustainability plan to reposition the country. Meanwhile, former President Goodluck Jonathan has commended the steps taken by the Bayelsa State Governor, Doye Diri, in tackling the coronavirus pandemic in the state. The former president made this known at a forum of the People's Democratic Party in Yenogwa. According to Dr. Jonathan, unity, cohesion and sacrifice for the actualization of party ideals and goals should be the motivating force for the survival of the party in Bayelsa State.
This is the first formal meeting between former President Goodluck Jonathan and Bayelsa State Governor Doye Diri since the governor's inauguration.
You are taking leadership.
Dr. Goodluck Jonathan, who is concerned that the governor's assumption of office is coming at a time when the world is battling to contain the spread of the coronavirus, believes social distancing will go a long way in helping to reduce the spread of the virus.
Face mask alone will not save us. What impresses me most is the social distancing. If we were crowded here, I would have left because I wouldn't want the people to say, oh, President Jonathan was also there when Bayelsans were pushing themselves.
The forum, attended by members of the People's Democratic Party in Yenogwa, the Bayelsa state capital, is also an opportunity for the former president to explain why he hasn't been active in politics.
After serving as the president of this country, I should go to some other areas where my services will be required, probably through that process, and be able to support the nation, support the state in one way or the other. That's why I've not been too active in clearly partisan political activities.
For Governor Doye Diri, a united front and commitment among party members and Bayelsans will help bring more development to Bayelsa State, even with the challenges posed by COVID-19.
Politics is meant to unite ourselves and bring development to our state. We all look for Bayelsa State so that we can bring development closer to our people, not so? Yes.
Bayelsa State currently has 6 confirmed cases of the coronavirus. The government believes with more support from Bayelsans, the state will win the war against the COVID-19 pandemic.
One person has died of COVID-19 in Gombe State, and this has been confirmed by the chairman of the state's task force on COVID-19, Professor Idris Mohammed. The man who recently returned from Bauchi State started showing symptoms of the disease, forcing the ward head of his community to call the attention of the COVID-19 committee. Meanwhile, the Gombe House of Assembly has summoned the State Task Force Committee on COVID-19 to explain the circumstances surrounding last week's protest at 2 isolation centers in the state's capital. The Speaker of the State House of Assembly, Abubakar Koba, says the House wants to know what led to the protest and what actions have been taken to resolve the issue.
We have heard from the task force the journey so far, the challenges they are facing, and of course their successes. There are successes and of course the journey so far. So the House is quite impressed with what has happened, and you could see the turnout is very impressive. All the members of the committee have been able to express their feelings and minds freely to the House. And like I said, the House is going to deliberate on the issues, and then we are coming up with a position.
And as reactions continue to trail the Infectious Diseases Bill in the House of Representatives, Speaker Femi Gbajabiamila is assuring transparency and accountability during the public hearing. During a meeting with members of civil society organizations at the National Assembly, the Speaker said the lower chamber is open to contributions from the public. He promised that the bill to be passed by the House will be the aggregate of the submissions of Nigerians.
The infectious disease bill, which was introduced to the floor of the House, a lot of the interest, a lot of the comments were genuine. A lot of comments were based on genuine feelings of how people felt. Some of it not. Some of it political, some of it based on a misunderstanding of the law. But quite a number raised some genuine issues. So this bill was put forward in the best interest of what I thought, to protect Nigerians. A lot of people are not aware that even as we speak, in our laws in Nigeria today, under the Child Rights Act, you must vaccinate your child. It's mandatory. It says every parent or guardian must vaccinate their child. And if you don't, it subjects you to imprisonment. But we all welcomed the Child Rights Act. We all did at the time. The reason why I say this is to tie it in with the conspiracy theory. And another misconception was that the vaccination was not meant to be to test anybody. They were meant to be vaccines that have been tried, tested, proven, certified by World Health Organization.
And that's all from Abuja. Back to you, Ijoma.
Thanks a lot, Linda. The Tolerum Group has donated 1 billion naira worth of cash and products to the federal government as part of efforts to curb the spread of COVID-19 in Nigeria. A statement from the managing director of Tolerum Group, Mr. Harish Aswani, explains that the donations are in addition to thousands of cartons of food products and hypo-disinfectant previously donated to multiple state governments, the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, and the Federal Airports Authority of Nigeria. While commending the government's efforts towards providing palliatives and medical personnel who risk their lives for caring for infected people, Mr. Aswani says the group, in collaboration with the NCDC, has also embarked on an enlightenment and awareness campaign to educate Nigerians on COVID-19 based on the World Health Organization's safety guidelines. The group has also been involved in the feeding of internally displaced persons and provision of product support to medical personnel in Lagos and Abuja, as well as setting up a 110-bed fully equipped intensive care center for the treatment of COVID-19 patients. Let's take a look at some business news for the day. Here's Kayode Okikiolu.
Well, many thanks, Ijoma, and you're welcome to Business News. The federal government has set up the Ajaokuta Presidential Project and Implementation Team to kickstart the process of redirecting the activities of the Ajaokuta steel plant after almost 4 decades of inactivity. This followed renewed interest by the Russian government, who are working with the Africa Import and Export Bank to pool funds in excess of $1.4 billion to revive the steel plant. That's after President Muhammadu Buhari brokered the new deal with the country's President Vladimir Putin late last year. According to the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Mr. Boss Mustafa, revamping the plant presents a unique opportunity to make Nigeria a hub for the production of steel.
Steel plant have languished in economic and productivity for about 4 decades, and previous efforts at reviving it had proved abortive. This has resulted in an unavoidable massive foreign exchange losses at intolerable opportunity cost to the country. The pressing need to redress these avoidable challenges has necessitated this presidential intervention at this time. This is further underscored by difficulties being witnessed with present challenges in the global oil industry. I'm happy to note that preliminary works have commenced to determine parameters for effective and coordinated takeoff of rehabilitation works on the steel plant.
And over to the NSE, where it's a negative start in the second trading week of May at the equities market, as renewed profit taking on the shares of Zenith and GT Bank pushed the all-share index lower at the close of Monday's session. Temple Ashaju has the details.
Thank you for joining us again on the Stock Market Report. Equities commenced the week on a negative note, downing the all-share index by 39 basis points and capping the equity capitalization at 12.4 trillion naira after some profits taken in the banking, industrial goods, and the insurance sectors. The bulls, however, struggled to stay afloat as the market breadth, which measured investor sentiment, recorded some 14 gainers against 12 losers. Unilever gains the most by 10%, while CAP lost the highest value by 9.83%. Activity level dwindled to kickstart the week as well, as the volume of transactions slowed by 64 basis points and the value of transaction was downbeat at 1.77 billion naira compared to 2.19 billion naira at the previous trading session. But FBN Holdings contributed the largest in trade volume to these transactions as the market settled its year-to-date losses at 10.77%. That's your stock market report. I'm Temple Ashaju.
And that's business news for tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Kayode Okikelu. The news at 10 continues with Ijeoma.
Thanks a lot, Kayode. Still ahead on the news at 10, criticisms trail British Prime Minister Boris Johnson's quarantine restrictive measures ahead of planned easing of lockdown. We'll have this and more from our London studios in Around the World in 5. Do join us again. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson has called on Britons to stay home and stay alert, responding to his initial message on the modified measures of the coronavirus lockdown in his address last night. During a press conference this evening, the Prime Minister explained that the COVID alert system, which aims to bring Britain to a point where the number of COVID-19 cases reduced drastically. Here's Simon Pusey with more international news in Around the World in 5.
Good evening and welcome to the Channel studio in London with your international news around the world in 5. In the UK, there's been criticism and confusion after Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced some quarantine measures will be eased in the country. In a televised speech, Mr. Johnson outlined plans to begin slowly easing the almost 7 weeks long coronavirus lockdown. He announced a limited easing of restrictions, including allowing people to exercise outside more often and encouraging those who cannot work from home to return to their jobs. However, he specified the coronavirus lockdown will not end yet in the UK, urging people to stay alert.
And so, no, this is not the time simply to end the lockdown this week. Instead, we're taking the first careful steps to modify our measures. And the first step is a change of emphasis that we hope that people will act on this week. We said that you should work from home if you can and only go to work if you must. We now need to stress that anyone who can't work from home, for instance, those in construction or manufacturing, should be actively encouraged to go to work, and we want it to be safe for you to get to work. So you should avoid public transport if at all possible, because we must and will maintain social distancing, and capacity will therefore be limited.
Meanwhile, across Europe, other countries are also easing restrictions. France has cautiously begun to lift its lockdown, with millions back in work after 8 weeks of restrictions. Shops are reopening, many pupils are returning to primary schools, and people will not need travel certificates when they leave home. But some parts of the country, including the capital Paris, remain under tighter controls, with the country split into green and red zones. Meanwhile, Belgium is opening up shops and the Netherlands are reopening libraries and hairdressers. In Spain, some restaurants can now open their doors, provided they impose social distancing rules. New coronavirus clusters have been reported in Wuhan City, where the virus first emerged, and the northeastern province of Jilin in China. Wuhan reported 5 new cases on Monday after confirming its first case since the 3rd of April. Authorities said the small cluster of cases were all from the same residential compound. China has been easing restrictions in recent weeks and cases had been declining. The small Wuhan cluster is the first to emerge since the end of the strict lockdown on the 8th of April. One of the 5 cases reported on Monday was the wife of an 89-year-old man who became the first confirmed case in the city in well over a month. Senegal's holy city of Touba is fighting a second wave of COVID-19 infections, indicating that swift action by authorities may not have stopped the virus from spreading. Confirmed cases in Touba have risen sevenfold to more than 190 since a market trader fell ill in April, ending a 2-week lull in new cases. The city confirmed its 27th case on Monday. An Iranian warship has accidentally struck another one with a missile during an exercise, killing 19 sailors and wounding 15 others. According to Iran's Navy, the incident took place during the training in the Gulf of Oman, a sensitive waterway that connects the Strait of Hormuz, through which about a fifth of the world's oil passes. Iran regularly conducts exercises in that area. Iran's state broadcaster says the frigate Jamaran fired at a training target released by a support ship, the Konarak. However, the support ship stayed too close to the target and was hit. In Russia, a fire in a private hospice for elderly people has killed 9 people and forced 9 others to be hospitalized. Russian investigators of the Moscow region announced they had detained the owner of the hospice. They said the blaze was likely caused by faulty electrical wiring, and a criminal investigation had been opened to establish potential violations of the safety rules. In Afghanistan, at least 4 people, including a child, have been injured after 4 back-to-back explosions in the capital, Kabul. The blasts were caused by roadside bombs targeted on a convoy of Afghan security personnel. So far, no group has claimed responsibility for the attack. The Afghan government forces have suffered heavy casualties in the past 2 months, and this might pose an immediate threat to the fragile peace deal signed by the United States and the Taliban. And finally, in southern India, millions of baby olive ridley turtles have made their way out from the beaches and into the sea. The number of newborn turtles is far larger than in previous years, as the virus pandemic has forced many people to stay home and beaches have been deserted. Rushikulya Beach in southeastern Odisha state is known to be one of the few rookeries in the world where the olive ridley turtles come to lay their eggs. Experts and authorities estimate that the turtles laid around 60 million eggs in Indian beaches this year. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the Channel studios in Lagos.
Welcome to Sports News. The United Kingdom has published a 50-page guidance document detailing how England will begin to ease lockdown measures. Step 2 of that plan includes permitting cultural and sporting events to take place behind closed doors for broadcast from June the 1st while avoiding the risk of large-scale social contact. And that's Sports News. Back to you, Gemma, for the close of the news at 10.
Thanks a lot, Olumide. And the main news again. President Muhammadu Buhari today ordered the task force on COVID-19 to procure some of Madagascar's coronavirus cure for validation. The PTF also said Catholic bishops have volunteered for 100 of their clinics as isolation centers. And that's the news at 10 tonight. Thank you so much for staying with us. I'm Ijoma Onyato. Do stay safe and good night.